I'm going to echo, just to remind you, the purpose of this evening, picking up from some of our speakers. We want to launch this conference, and we want to hear from you, listen to you, of your experience and journey with Lyme disease. That's the purpose for this evening. My challenge for myself this evening is to try to keep us relatively on time. I'm going to ask for your kind collaboration to stick to the 5 minutes that have been assigned, and I'll give you some instructions on how that will happen. All right. Thank you very much. Our first speaker, Karen Ludwig. Karen?
Good evening, everyone, and bonjour. Thank you for being here tonight and allowing me to also be here tonight. My name is Karen Ludwig, and I'm the Member of Parliament for New Brunswick Southwest. I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to be the voice for people in New Brunswick who've experienced the effects of Lyme disease. I expect that many of us are here for numerous different reasons. The reason I am here this evening, participating in this conference on developing a federal framework for Lyme disease, is because Canadians need this to happen. I'm not a doctor nor a scientist. My previous career was in education. I want to thank the experts who are here, and we look forward to hearing your insights and recommendations throughout the conference. Here is something I would like to discuss with you tonight. Too many Canadian individuals and families are negatively affected by Lyme disease. I learned this while knocking on doors during the election campaign. I heard something surprising. The number of people suffering or affected by Lyme disease in my riding was astounding. For those of you who are not familiar with New Brunswick, my riding is vast and largely rural. We are bordered by the Bay of Fundy, 4 federal electoral ridings in New Brunswick, and the state of Maine. In fact, many Lyme disease sufferers in New Brunswick, like Bruce Ross, traveled to Bangor, Maine with his wife and paid for their own medical assistance, similar to the stories I heard from numerous people across my riding. Some of my constituents live on islands only accessible by ferry, and in one case, the only road to access the island is actually through the United States during the winter. Most people in my riding live in communities of less than 2,000 people. We definitely need to have a strong voice out there supporting people and those suffering from Lyme disease. My point here is to simply say, no matter where a Canadian lives geographically, no matter how remote or rural a community is, and no matter the province you live, each and every Canadian deserves the same standard of care and access to diagnoses and treatment for Lyme disease. My first experience with Lyme disease was at the veterinarian's office. My husband and I brought our yellow lab Nacho in for a routine visit, and the vet was asked if he could randomly screen for Lyme disease. That was in 2007. It has been 8 years. With early diagnosis and proper treatment, Nacho is now an old boy of 13. That experience taught me how insidious and dangerous Lyme disease can be. Unfortunately, receiving effective early treatment has not been the case for so many Canadians and certainly for New Brunswickers, as the symptoms may not be present until the disease has progressed, and the conflict within our medical communities with the narrow definition of Lyme disease. The people I met in my riding told me stories of long-term physical suffering, of misdiagnoses, of misunderstanding, frustrations. They often expressed how chronic disease has been very draining on their relationships with their families, on employment and job performance, on finances, and on the quality of life in particular. They told me the mental health impact of dealing with a disease that is so varied, complex, and personal is almost as debilitating as the disease itself. Being sick and not knowing the reason why must be terrifying. The stress, depression, and anxiety resulting from Lyme disease diagnosis, many said, is overwhelming. Many people had to create their own community of peer support. One such organization in Fredericton, New Brunswick, aptly named TikTok, has a Facebook page dedicated to information and discussions designed to educate the public about Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses while providing support and a sounding board for fellow Lyme sufferers. Representatives from TikTok recently met with the New Brunswick Provincial Health Minister. The key point they wanted to express is the serious lack of comprehensive diagnosis and treatment guidelines for Lyme disease. While the federal government has made some website updates and changes with recent resources, the province of New Brunswick is physicians and Lyme disease sufferers are seeking current knowledge and best practices for diagnosis and treatments. We do need a federal framework on Lyme disease to certainly help guide our provinces and health bodies. I just want to make sure I get this out before my time is cut. On May 30th, my colleague Mark Garrettson and I are hosting an all-party roundtable for members of Parliament so we can discuss the federal framework and share knowledge. The uptake on that, I will say very reassuringly, has been well around the House of Commons. We will get a lot of interest in it. I know we can make this happen. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your stories, and merci beaucoup.
Is Rias St. Pierre in the room? Perfect, you're up next. Holly, go ahead.
Bonjour et merci. Hello, and thank you for joining me and others here tonight. My name is Holly Donaho. I'm a professor at the University of Florida, where my research focuses on outdoor recreation and nature-based tourism and infectious disease. My work related to Lyme and other tick-borne diseases has been published, but it's been inspired by my own journey with Lyme and co-infections. I'm also here representing the Florida Lyme Disease Association. You may know them because they created the Take Out a Bite Out of Lyme Challenge that went viral last year and this year. So we're doing some pretty good work. So it's my privilege to share with you a short narrative about my experience with Lyme, as well as a few recommendations for going forward with policy, research, and public health spending related to Lyme disease in Canada. In 2006, I was unknowingly infected while doing my job, researching and publishing journal articles about nature-based tourism and writing outdoor recreation management plans for the Government of Canada. The best diagnosticians in the nation's capital could not make sense of my symptoms, including the bullseye rash and the textbook Lyme symptoms that I was presenting with. At the time, Lyme disease was not in Canada. Doctors weren't looking for it. In the months and years that followed that misdiagnosis, I developed a long list of health issues that were both baffling and debilitating. In 2010, I left my position at the University of Ottawa and accepted one at the University of Florida. I immediately sought out a family doctor who immediately suspected Lyme disease. I subsequently tested positive. My case was reported to the state of Florida, as well as the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. One doctor in Florida, which at the time was not an endemic area, did what many doctors in Canada could not do, and that was give me a diagnosis and start me on treatment. Because my diagnosis was missed for 5 years, my symptoms are debilitating and severe, and the treatment has been frightening and challenging physically, emotionally, and economically. I've since been treated with over 150 different medications. I have been in and out of the hospital repeatedly. I have been bedbound and housebound for months. I'm unable to drive. I'm unable to care for myself and my family. And I've had multiple surgeries. In the last 18 months, the doctors recorded a rapid decline in my cognitive function, and the doctors agreed that I should really take some time off work. As a professor, I really need my brain. It's my moneymaker, and this was devastating. They suggested that I should not go out alone. I definitely should not be driving because I'm often confused. I have difficulty communicating, and I have memory loss. Despite a now aggressive line of treatment from one of the best doctors, one of the best Lyme doctors in the world that I have the privilege of seeing, I continue to experience frightening symptoms. In the weeks leading up to this conference, I developed chest pain, and I've just been diagnosed with carditis and inflammation of the nerves around my heart. So despite treatment, my infection continues to worsen. It's been a rough road, but I'm grateful that in the United States, I was able to obtain a diagnosis and treatment, both which I could not get while I was living in Canada. Ottawa is my hometown. I stand here before you looking well. I look like a professor having something to say, but hidden from view is a battle that I fight within. Lyme disease is an invisible disease, but patients can no longer be overlooked. I'm raising my voice on behalf of the millions who have become infected in Canada and the United States. That number might sound high, but you'll find it in my published articles. It's the truth. Check the CDC numbers. In Canada, Lyme patients have been victimized by the infection. They've been victimized by the lack of public awareness. They've been victimized by the lack of reliable diagnostic tools. And they've been victimized by the lack of effective treatment that can be accessed within our national borders. So I'd like to wrap up by impressing upon all of you and those that are listening and making use of this data that the magnitude of the social and the economic costs of the disease on individuals and on communities and countries and nations are significant and they're cumulative. These costs could be avoided in future, and it's my recommendation that resources be immediately directed into financing research programs, developing a national surveillance program, developing a public awareness campaign, and providing support for those living with Lyme. I'd like to thank the conference organizers, as well as those who supported the bill through Parliament, the Senate, and all of you for listening. Thank you.
Stephen Filiatro. Okay, next. Yes.
Hello, my name is Reyes from Winnipeg, Manitoba. My experience with Lyme disease began in 2008. I had just started working for a mineral exploration company as a field geologist. I spent the majority of tick season completing typical field work, but had no awareness about Lyme disease. When you work outdoors every day, finding a tick attached to you is a common occurrence. I have removed dozens of ticks for myself over the years and never did a concern cross my mind. In the winter of 2009, I started having pain in my right ankle and knee. The pain worsened and started affecting my back. I did extensive physiotherapy, massage therapy, chiropractic, osteopathy, and other treatments with little to no success. My own research brought me to Lyme disease. In 2010, after much resistance from doctors, I had an ELISA test done and received a negative result. But I went unaware of the significant limitations of this test at the time. I was convinced I didn't have Lyme. I continued to seek answers for the next 4 years. I went to multiple neurologists, orthopedic surgeons, and continued treatments as well as multiple visits to emergency rooms because I could barely walk or was in such severe pain I could hardly move. During this time, I had over a dozen x-rays, 6 MRI scans, 2 CT scans, nerve induction studies, as well as countless blood tests. Nothing was found that could explain my symptoms. Unfortunately, not a single medical professional asked me about Lyme disease or even considering my high-risk profession. However, doctors suggest that I might have fibromyalgia and multiple sclerosis, but none of them would actually do anything about it. In 2013, I was diagnosed with celiac disease. A strict gluten-free diet failed to help with my symptoms, and they continued to worsen. By 2014, I had severe widespread joint, muscle, and nerve pain throughout my body and started having numbness in my face and scalp, accompanied with severe headaches that would affect my vision along with vertigo. I tried to sleep with ice packs on my head in a desperate attempt at relief. However, I rarely slept due to insomnia, and if I did, it was interrupted or I would wake up soaked in sweat. Midway through 2014, I discovered how faulty the ELISA test was. Lyme was therefore back on my radar. I found a naturopathic doctor who was familiar with Lyme, and shortly after this, I had a CDC positive blood result from a US lab. I was referred to a doctor in the US. At the time, this surprised me, and as now I had a diagnosis, it should have been easy to get treatment within Canada. So I called HealthLinks for advice, and again, they recommended I find a doctor in the US, and which was very surprising because that was my own healthcare system telling me this. I still thought I could get a diagnosis here, so I went to my family doctors. And I was shocked even more and disappointed to find out he didn't know what Lyme disease was. But he did refer me to an infectious disease doctor. But unfortunately, the infectious disease doctor refused to see me without ever speaking to me or asking about my symptoms or history of tick bites. I had no choice but to seek treatment in the US. Within about a month of antibiotic treatment, my severe headaches and vision problems resolved. Several more months, and I started having improved sleep, and my drenching night sweats were gone, and I had some improvements in my widespread pain. In the following months and until now, unfortunately, my joint and muscle pain has once again worsened to the point where I've been unable to work for the last 6 months. Now, after years of fighting the medical system, I am now fighting the insurance companies as I have been denied any disability benefits, as they say I can't prove I have a disability. When you consider the limited public awareness, limited no knowledge about Lyme disease by our physicians, the severe limitations of our current approved testing, and the attitudes of doctors denying the presence of Lyme disease in Canada or various provinces, as well as doctors refusing to see patients, it's no surprise our current system is failing to diagnose and treat Lyme disease. Thank you.
Stephen, you're up next. I hope I get the name right, Deborah Fry? Thank you. You're up next. Stephen, please.
Evening, folks. My story is a little bit different. I'm a diesel mechanic and electrician. I'm a hands-on individual. Je suis quelqu'un qui travaille avec ses mains, qui est pragmatique, qui regarde les choses de façon très méthodique. I'm used to looking at things very methodically and very structured. I do not personally suffer from Lyme disease, but I am a caregiver to a close friend, Heather King. She is a nature photographer. She's somebody who spends a lot of time outside, and she was affected by Lyme, but without knowing about it. Ma blonde, dans le temps, mon ami proche, a venu jusqu'à aujourd'hui, a été affecté très profondément par la maladie du Lyme parce que c'est une photographe de nature. C'est quelqu'un qui sort beaucoup dehors, puis qui passe beaucoup de temps avec les animaux, puis qui passe beaucoup de temps dans des zones qui sont très propices à l'infection. Donc, j'ai vu de proche les effets que ça pouvait avoir. As a caregiver, I saw very closely what this disease has done to somebody. I watched firsthand 3 straight years of varied medical tests, varied misdiagnoses, and I watched a person's health from my 2 eyes slowly decline to the point where she wound up in a wheelchair, restricted mobility, trouble walking, trouble with balance. J'ai regardé la santé de quelqu'un au déclin graduel au fil de 3 ans, passer d'une personne tout à fait normale à voir une personne perdre l'équilibre, perdre la mobilité, perdre la sainteté d'esprit, l'équilibre et l'utilité des muscles, jusqu'à se retrouver dans une chaise roulante. Puis de voir les médecins manquer de réponses, to see doctor after doctor run out of answers, run out of things to say, run out of options for testing, de voir, de manquer de chances, de tests à faire, de manquer de diagnosis, de manquer de façon de parler à un patient, de manquer de respect envers un patient. I've seen doctors treat patients with a complete lack of respect. C'est des choses qui sont inhumaines à subir pour un individu. These things are inhuman for an individual to suffer. J'ai vu par la suite, par exemple, une autre approche. I saw afterward a new approach. I saw gradually, à l'usure, okay, by wear, physician after physician, sooner or later, we find people that care. And we find people willing to work as a team. Okay, we find dentists, we find chiropractors, we find naturopaths, we find alternative medicine doctors. Du monde qui sort de la médecine individuelle, okay, qui sortent de leur métier, des dentistes, des chiropraticiens, des naturopathes, des ostéopathes, du monde qui veulent travailler en équipe. Si vous avez la patience de passer à travers de tous les médecins qui ne veulent pas sortir nécessairement de leur métier, prenez le temps, puis vous allez vous bâtir une équipe qui vont vous faire votre affaire. Take the time to go through a team that will work for you, work on your symptoms, work with you, so that you can get to where she is today. Lâchez pas prise. Your emotional support, the things you do for these people are what matter most. The little things, keeping their morale up, les petites choses, les plus petites choses que vous allez faire, couper un fruit, les niaiseries que vous penseriez contribuer à rien, gardez la morale haute, gardez le soutien de votre confrère ou consoeur, gardez son esprit en vie, parce que c'est vous qui faites la différence. You make the difference in these people's lives. Caregivers, this is as much your disease as the people you live with. The support system is critical. Le réseau de soutien est critique. Merci de votre attention.
Merci, M. Filiatro. Madame Fraley, Michel Gagnon is up next.
My name is Deborah Fry. I'm a late-stage Lyme patient and a co-founder of the Ontario Lyme Alliance. I believe that I was infected with Lyme disease in the fall of 2009 or spring 2010 while traveling in Europe or while caring for a horse that I regularly brought in from the high grassy fields in the Rouge Valley and often rode along and through the Rouge River. Like most Lyme patients, I suffered from a myriad of systemic symptoms. Despite all of them, including encephalomyelitis, which had been diagnosed in Ontario as transverse myelitis, and for which testing for Lyme disease was highly recommended in the medical literature, I was not able to access testing for Lyme for almost 2 years in Canada, even though I repeatedly asked many doctors I saw to be tested. By the time my family doctor did order Ontario Lyme serology, but no test for European Lyme, I tested non-reactive to the whole cell ELISA used at the time. Not long after, I learned my efforts to get proper testing were all for naught. By then, I had become immune compromised, and a protein electrophoresis test showed lower than normal levels of immunoglobulins needed to actually create antibodies. This is an under-researched aspect of Lyme disease. We know that it does cause dysfunction. We know that it causes compromise. Research is only yet beginning, and it has a long way to go. My family doctor at that point and 2 other physicians then tried very hard to refer me to a specialist. I was turned down for referral and proper assessment by 6 Ontario infectious diseases doctors. 2 of them had been contacted by telephone and had verbally agreed to see me. But then, after seeing my files, the receptionist, even when asked weekly, took 2 months to report back that those doctors had changed their minds, much to the dismay and the frustration of the referring doctors. My family doctor and my neurologist both finally gave up and told me to seek a knowledgeable doctor in the United States. As a Lyme patient in Ontario, I feel, and I have been, medically abandoned. I became very aware that in part I was turned down for these referrals due to the controversy associated with Lyme. Physicians were fearful of having to endure disruptive and harassing investigations into their practice if they took on a case requiring clinical judgment or if the patient might require a treatment protocol that differed from the IDSA guidelines. I learned that one of the doctors who rejected my referral had been issued a written caution regarding his treatment of Lyme disease by the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, which seemed to be very common knowledge among the infectious disease community. I eventually found out that that doctor launched an appeal of the CPSO decision. What is not well known is that this doctor won his appeal. The review committee decided that all but one of the CPSO cautions were unreasonable and required the CPSO to amend its original decision to a single warning regarding lack of timely reporting to the patient's family physician. The full details of this case, HB v. SG 2013, are a matter of public record available through the Canadian Legal Information Institute website. There's something seriously morally and ethically wrong when doctors simply refuse to assess or care for patients with complex illness to avoid controversy or personal discomfort. The outcome of HBSG case should be a lesson that doctors should not feel constrained in using physician judgment when determining appropriate treatment, even when it needs to diverge from IDSA recommendations. As long as doctors document the treatment, the rationale for it, that they've appropriately advised the patient of the risks and obtained informed consent, the obligations when treating Lyme disease are no different than would be necessary for any other disease. As an Ontario Lyme Alliance member, it appears to me that the Ministry of Health officials and public health professionals have been deferring necessary changes to the information being disseminated to both physicians and the public while anticipating publication of the new IDSA Lyme guidelines. In January, given the long time that had passed without publication of the promised summary response to the public comment period, I wrote to Ms. Jennifer Padbrook, Vice President of Standards and Practice Guidelines at the IDSA, to ask for a timeline for the new Lyme guidelines to be completed. She responded, because guideline development is a thorough and rigorous process, it requires significant time and can take anywhere from 2 to 5 years. I would like to enter a copy of that correspondence into the record. Maintaining the status quo while waiting for up to 5 years for the new IDSA guidelines to be published before updating and improving Lyme disease education to reflect current scientific findings will only ensure that more people will be infected with Lyme and patients will continue to be medically mismanaged. On a personal note, I credit my ability to be here tonight to the treatment that I continue to receive from my physician in the United States. For me, this has been a very long and hard journey, and while I have certainly improved, this journey is not over yet. Thank you. Can I leave this correspondence with you?
You may do that, yeah.
Okay,
Just leave it right here.
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michel Gagnon. Margaret Glazer, are you in the room? You're up next.
I'm a mountain enthusiast and Lyme warrior. Lyme is an invisible illness that needs to be diagnosed and treated properly. 28 years ago, I had a bullseye rash on my arm that I got in Banff, and the doctors told me it was ringworm. Months later, I lost the sensation of my whole lower arm for 3 months. I made a list of all my crazy symptoms over a few months and showed the doctor. According to the doctor, there was nothing wrong. Blood tests were always normal, and I looked strong. I knew something was seriously wrong, and someday I would have to figure it out. In the 1990s, I was mountain bike racing and an athlete on the National Development Freestyle Ski Team for moguls. I had many injuries and thought the pains, joint aches, and muscular tension that pulled my body out of alignment were all related to my injuries. I couldn't perform during competitions. I almost always crashed as my legs would not bend properly. In training, I rarely fell. During guides exams, I always got sick or just didn't feel right. It affected my ability to communicate my thoughts and had poor memory recall, 1 second there, 1 second gone, and variable performance due to muscles seizing up. For years, I kept trying to figure out all my aches and pains and chronic tightness, regardless of how much I stretched. The pain was indescribable, and doctors told me I would have to live with it. I was desperate to ease the pain and kept researching. Please, anybody, help. I saw many practitioners to address my muscle tension and alignment issues. Everything helped, but it always came back. I learned that Lyme is an opportunist. It takes advantage of any form of stress and migrates into old injuries. Symptoms always change, sometimes by the minute, day, week, month, or year. Trying to figure out my health always had me puzzled and searching for answers. I tried all sorts of cleanses, started taking more vitamins and eating more healthy to get my sporadically vanishing energy back. Everything helped, but I needed to get to the root of the problem. One day my chiropractor told me, I think you have a systemic illness. You have chronic muscle tension that pulls everything out of alignment. You respond well to treatment, but 2 days later you're back to square one. He was the only person that believed there was something wrong. I then went gluten-free and thought I had it figured. In 2008, during my 5th season of working as a hiking guide, I felt zapped of all my energy. I was too tired to do my usual rock climbing or biking after work or on days off. I was barely hanging on. A few months later, I deteriorated quickly and thought I was dying. Every time I stood up, I thought I was going to pass out. I spent months on the couch, sometimes too tired to read or watch TV. Symptoms always changed. I had swollen lymph nodes, sore throat, a level of exhaustion I didn't know existed, eye pain, focusing issues, extreme muscle tension, bone and joint pain, shooting pains, muscle twitching, rib pain, chest pains, palpitations, shortness of breath, nausea, carpal tunnel, tendonitis, Bell's palsy, food allergies, chemical sensitivities, tremors, chills, drenching night sweats, randomly sore foot, dry and bloodshot eyes, dental issues, acne, poor memory, low body temperature. The list could go on and on. I've been always mentally strong, but something was eating my spirit. My balance deteriorated, and I could no longer do the bouncy yoga moves I used to do with ease. I went to the doctor to get my lab results back. All the blood tests were mostly normal. She told me it's all in my head, and I need to see a psychologist. It's a beautiful, sunny, 30-degree day out there. Do you think I want to be inside, barely moving off the couch? I went to a Chinese medicine doctor that kept me going, but the mystery illness was still there. 6 months later, somebody told me I probably have Lyme disease. Thanks to all the Lyme sufferers who helped diagnose, somebody has to do it. I tested positive for Lyme on the Western blot IgG through IGNX in California. None of my co-infections were positive. This was the start of my healing. I started taking doxycycline. After 3 months, another sufferer asked me, "What else are you taking to treat all forms of the Lyme bacteria? What about co-infections? I'm seriously concerned about you." This is when I realized it was all up to my own research to get me through this. I must admit, I even questioned whether I needed more treatment, as I thought I felt okay at the time after 3 months of treatment. I was far from okay and didn't realize how sick I was until I started receiving real treatment, addressing all forms of the bacteria, biofilms, and co-infections. I started seeing a Lyme literate doctor in the US. He clinically diagnosed me with Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia. For 6 years, I was on a mix of antibiotics and herbs. I spent my time researching and trying to figure out how to get rid of this horrible disease that is not diagnosed or recognized in Canada. I went to a functional medicine doctor and had many tests done. Lyme depleted me of vital nutrients, minerals, amino acids, hormones, and created cellular issues. I tried to stop antibiotics a few different times. Dental and face symptoms returned. I did more research. My immune system wasn't working. All my immunoglobulins were below normal. I received IVIG, and my immune system finally started working. Our universal healthcare system failed me. I was one of the lucky ones, as my partner Martin supported me and paid for my treatments. Other than political reasons, if we aren't being treated because of how costly it could be, then you need to think about all the doctor's visits, hospital visits, specialists, fertility docs, blood tests, x-rays, MRIs, ECGs, Holter monitors, and ultrasounds I've had over the last 28 years that have shown absolutely nothing. If my bullseye rash was treated immediately, a lot of money would be saved. There would be no pain and suffering, alienation due to a disease that is not recognized, unproductivity, and maybe I would have a child. Where we get Lyme from doesn't matter. Tick maps don't matter. It's scattered all over the globe. Our universal healthcare system needs education, and doctors need to be able to treat and diagnose regardless of where or how it was transmitted. People need help, and they need it now.
Thank you, Michelle. Margaret Glazer. Is Cecil Goff in the room? Okay.
My name is Margaret Glazer. I'm from Montreal, and I'm a Lyme survivor. My health nightmare began 15 years ago when I was 19 years old. Suddenly, I started feeling sick every single day. I remember at first naively thinking, I'll go to the doctor and the doctor will help get me well. But in the span of 12 years, I saw over 30 doctors, generalists and specialists of all sorts, who all very quickly dismissed me with complete bogus diagnoses. Slowly but surely, my symptoms worsened. They multiplied, affecting my entire body, making me increasingly incapacitated, unable to work, get out of the house or out of bed much, take care of my basic needs. Extremely ill and repeatedly told there was nothing actually wrong with me, I considered suicide on numerous occasions. I felt like I was dying on the inside and I had nowhere to turn. After years of pain, exhaustion, relentless research, I finally saw a doctor who's knowledgeable about chronic illness and who not only took my symptoms seriously, but did proper testing and diagnosed me with Lyme disease. For the record, I tested unequivocally CDC positive. With a mix of long-term antibiotics and other complementary methods, I gained my life back within a year and felt better than in my entire adult life. After being diagnosed with Lyme disease, I became involved in the Lyme community in Quebec, only to realize the extent of this devastating systemic issue. Je représente aujourd'hui tous les Québécois aux prises avec cette maladie qui les empêche de vivre et pour laquelle ils n'ont aucune aide dans la province. Déni de l'ampleur du problème, pas de soutien médical, pas d'aide financière ou gouvernementale et une santé qui dégringole. C'est l'abandon total. On parle de centaines ou même de milliers de vies affectées et le nombre de cas d'infection augmente à un rythme faramineux. La situation est aberrante, ne fait qu'empirer. Le problème est endémique et les patients ont depuis longtemps compris que ce n'est pas chez leurs médecins qu'ils vont trouver de l'aide. Lyme sufferers desperately want to get to the root cause of their issues. Sadly, we are faced with MDs who show great contempt towards chronic ill patients, showing savage disregard for our suffering. We are told to stop worrying, to stop looking into potential solutions, and just accept that our problems are not real, that they're psychosomatic, of unknown origin. They label us with numerous misdiagnoses, and of course, push for us to take an appropriate medication. Patients are ridiculed and insulted. They are called attention-seeking hypochondriacs. They are told they have OCD because they focus so much on their health and their symptoms. They are told that depression causes their seizures, that their anxiety causes their vision problems, and that overall, they're just lazy people who don't want to deal with life. It is staggering how often we hear this nonsense being told to patients. On what evidence are these doctors basing their diagnoses? In a world of evidence-based medicine, it appears that doctors, and specifically infectious disease doctors, are often relying on their own magical thinking when it comes to Lyme patients. They freely throw around terms like placebo and psychosomatic, unwilling or maybe simply unable to do their actual job properly. We are taken for fools, seen as gullible people drawn to a quacky diagnosis of chronic Lyme disease that we stumbled upon on the internet. I have spoken to hundreds of Lyme patients, and let me be clear, nobody, absolutely nobody wants to be part of this club. We fight strong and stick together because we have to for survival. When the medical system is against you, then much of society follows. And the isolation of the Lyme predicament is truly a gut-wrenching and horribly difficult human experience. We fight because we don't want anyone else to go through what we've been through. We fight so that others know that it can get better, that with the right help they can recover, that there is hope. We fight so that people know about Lyme disease and related infections, so they know how widespread they are. Medical arrogance, a profound disconnect from the reality of chronic illness, and over-reliance on outdated and flawed science and testing. Those are the real disease du jour. Most doctors would rather believe that thousands are having the same mental and physical delusions than to question the mantras they've been taught to repeat. The rare compassionate doctors who are up to date with their scientific knowledge and who truly care about helping their patients heal are prosecuted by the medical police. It seems that we've gotten seriously off track when it comes to our healthcare. Let's not forget that the primary goal of medicine is to make people well. We should all be concerned first and foremost by the reality of the Canadian Lyme disease patients. The present medical system in Canada is relying on outdated and flawed information, masqueraded as science, causing thousands undue suffering. We need to do better because the current standards are failing us miserably, and we need to do it now. Lyme patients and enlightened doctors have so much to teach. It's up to everyone to listen. Being sick is not a crime. I hope this conference helps put a stop to the war that is being waged on Lyme disease patients.
Thank you, Margaret. Cecil Goff. Carolyn Harris. Okay, thank you. Cecil?
My name is Cecil Goff. I'm an oncology nurse. I'm an advocate and an educator. I'm the founder of the Guelph Lyme Support Group and the Lyme Symposium, which is the first patient-focused conference of its kind in Canada. It will launch in October 2016 and tour Canada in 2017. And I have had Lyme disease for 25 years. I was finally diagnosed in October 2014 by a lab in California. And prior to that, even though I've been a nurse for almost 20 years, all I knew about Lyme disease was that you get bit by a tick. I'm from Newfoundland. We don't have those there. And that it sucked. That's pretty much all I knew about Lyme disease. And boy, it's been a steep learning curve in the last 18 months. And there are two specific areas I have been working politically to address. And I'd like to read to you an excerpt from a letter that's recently been sent out to MPP Mike Mantha, MPP Liz Sandals, and my MP Lloyd Longfield in Guelph, Ontario. I have two issues that I'm working on. One is for the reasonable and responsible access to care and treatment. To date, Lyme patients in Canada have not received any funding from the Long-Term Care Ministry of Health out-of-country prior approval program. I have not been able to apply because I have not been able to secure a signature of a physician as outlined in the form. The out-of-country application is based on the Provincial Health Insurance Act, and it states that a signature of a doctor in Ontario who specializes in the illness is required. And I feel, I have asked 5 specialists who are involved in my care to sign the application, and all have refused. I've been refused assessment by 2 infectious disease doctors. I waited 14 months to finally see one at McMaster in Hamilton, and she refused to sign the out-of-country prior approval form, and she also refused to accept my lab results from California, confirming my diagnosis of Lyme, and she also refused to accept a letter that was written especially for her from my Lyme specialist, a doctor in Albany, New York. And he also provided research documents. She did not accept those either. And I have all of this in writing as evidence. I am a nurse, and I am from Newfoundland, and I cover my tracks. That's not in the letter, but my MP knows that. I told him in 2016, reminded him that I am from Newfoundland. I have a very strong constitution. And I told him my motto for 2016 is that I am going to be a growing concern. And he remembered it when I met up with him 2 months later. Back to the letter. I feel that this out-of-country application form and the Health Insurance Act that it's based on, it is discriminatory to Lyme patients in Canada. Now, discrimination is a pretty harsh word, but it's discrimination and it's negligence, and it's directly against our human rights to the access of appropriate treatment in Canada. It is our right as a patient. To date, I have spent $140,000 of my own money out of pocket for health care, and I've exhausted my life savings. With the passing of Bill C-442, Health Canada now recognizes that our current guidelines for treating and assessing Lyme disease are flawed, and that Lyme disease is not appropriately treated or managed in this country. I'm pleased to be attending this conference. I believe it is a significant first step in creating the necessary framework for dealing with this issue, but Lyme patients need help now. I believe the second issue is I believe I contracted Lyme disease 25 years ago when I trained with the British Army in Thetford Forest, England, an area now known to be endemic for Lyme disease in the UK. I grew up in the Army Cadets from the age of 13, and I served as a second lieutenant in the CIC. I've trained all across Canada, and I've been in many high-risk areas. When I spoke with the National Cadet Organization last year, I was told by the assistant of a lieutenant commander that the timeline exceeds the statute of limitations, that I would have to sue the Crown. I told him that was unacceptable, especially given as I was a minor. As an advocate, I've received more than 200 letters from people all across Canada in the past 8 months who are seeking help and resources for Lyme disease in this country. I've also heard from 3 men, 2 who are brothers, who have contracted Lyme while in the military and have not received assistance or support from DND or Veteran Affairs. What I'm asking for, I'm asking that provincial and federal ministries of health anticipate the changes likely to emerge from this conference and proactively and as soon as possible amend the respective health insurance acts in all provinces to facilitate the speedy and necessary treatment and assessment of Lyme disease so that thousands of us don't have to go across the border. And I'm also asking for support and compensation for our members in service, whether that's the Reg Force, the reserves, or people who are in the Army Cadets. And I ask for appropriate prevention and prevention programs to be taught. So I'm really hoping that this will happen. And the one question I keep asking over and over is this: I'm an oncology nurse, and I know that no cancer patient in Canada would be denied access to chemotherapy and treatment. I have late-stage Lyme disease. Why am I not worthy? So please help Canada find a way to help us out.
Carolyn, is Maria Hillier in the room? Maria Hillier. Okay, you're up next. Okay. Carolyn, please.
Hello, my name is Carolyn, and I live here in Ottawa. I've been living with chronic Lyme disease and co-infections for the past 9 years or so. I don't know when or where I got infected, but I started to get sick around when I was in 6th grade. I had rashes, frequent colds and flus, and other symptoms. Over the next several years, I developed more and more symptoms of increasing severity, like severe fatigue, difficulty thinking, anxiety, digestive problems, and more. I went from doctor to doctor, but I was either given a misdiagnosis or treated dismissively or told it was all in my head. As my illness got worse without getting any medical help, I had to stop attending school regularly, playing sports, writing, and doing many other things that I love to do. About 6.5 years after my illness began, I was finally tested for Lyme disease for the first time. The test that they used was the ELISA test, which I have heard has a less than 50% accuracy rate. The test came back negative. Later that year, my mom learned more about Lyme disease and how the testing can be inaccurate. So we decided to get me tested for it using the IGeneX labs in the United States. This time, I tested positive. It was only then, after I had been ill for 7 years, that I finally got diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. The longer that a person has chronic Lyme disease, the more difficult it is to treat. That is the case with me. I've been sick for such a long time that treatment is very difficult. If I had been diagnosed with Lyme disease and co-infections when I first got sick, I would probably be healthy today. I would be studying at university, and I would be involved in sports, animal rights activism, and writing. Instead, my health is getting worse. I have to deal with severe symptoms like fatigue and difficulty thinking daily, and I am still unable to go to school or work. I have seen many doctors even since I have been diagnosed with Lyme disease, and many of them have told me that they simply don't know enough about Lyme disease to be able to treat me, and one of them even told me that chronic Lyme disease doesn't even exist. It is so important for mainstream medical doctors to learn how to recognize, diagnose, and treat chronic Lyme disease and co-infections as soon as possible for each patient. Please develop a strategy to make this happen. Thank you for listening to my story.
Is Elaine Husband with us this evening? Elaine Husband? Emily Jameson. Okay, we'll have you afterwards, please. Maria?
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you for having me here and inviting me to speak tonight. I would also like to thank my husband, children, Doctors Tom and Angela, and my mentor. My name is Maria Hillier, and I have chronic Lyme disease. I have been battling it for over 5 years. I would like to rewind the clock to 2011. This is when my story really began. It was a beautiful summer day, and we were spending the day at a pool party and barbecue in an upscale subdivision in Leamington, Ontario. No bush, no long grass, no weeds, and one tree in the backyard. As the day got quite hot, we moved our chairs under a tree for the shade. I can recall the birds were singing and a couple of squirrels were playing in the tree. The next thing I noticed that there was a small dark bug on my arm. I went to brush it off, but it wouldn't move. I then went into the house and I got a needle and some tweezers and I began to try and remove it. I managed to get some of it out, but not all. The next day, I continued, got the rest of it out. For me, this was just the beginning. Within months, I became terribly ill, and like everyone else, I could barely get out of bed. Chronic fatigue, going on and on and on from doctor and doctor and doctor. Over the next year, I was sent for several unnecessary tests, such as MRIs, CAT scans, X-rays, ultrasounds, bone scans. I was given several diagnoses, such as MS, fibromyalgia. I had many doctors roll their eyes at me. I was also told to seek professional help. I did a little bit of research on MS because that was one of my diagnoses. Do you know that Canada has the highest rate in the world? It shares all the symptoms of Lyme disease. It is also a degenerative and autoimmune condition. The US had posted on their MS website this information, and many people that had MS or were diagnosed with it then got retested, IGeneX, and tested positive for Lyme. As my condition began to worsen and worsen, I started missing many days at work and social activities. In 2013, a friend and coworker happened to notice my symptoms. He asked me to get some blood work done at a lab and send it away to California, as I tested negative in Canada. He was certain it was Lyme disease by his journey. He was very educated because he had it years prior. I did it, and I then tested positive for it. Due to the fact that some of us have tested positive in the US, we don't count in Canada. We're not on Canada's list. That's unfair. As time went on, I spent almost a year in my house, most days not getting out of bed, no social life, nothing. I was in excruciating pain. My ears rang constantly, my vision blurry, and I had a lot of neurological problems. I also lost almost 40 pounds. I got to the point that I wish I could just go to sleep and not wake up. But my husband and my family is what kept me going. I was never, ever able to return back to my job after these 3 years of dealing with Lyme. I finally retired from work last month after being an employee there for over 20 years. Losing my income was a large burden. All my treatments, everything, my blood work is not covered here in Canada. We have spent thousands. As of today, I feel Lyme disease will be a national crisis, just like AIDS and hepatitis. Canada needs to move forward and get improved testing done here. There's a simple urine test available in the States, but not in Canada. NanoTrap is the name of it. It can provide at any point during the infection and during and after the course of treatment, and will tell you if you have Lyme disease. It takes minutes to do, and it's 99% accurate. But we as Canadians cannot get it. Why is it not available, Canadians? Better yet, what about a vaccine? LymeRx, along with Dr. Steer, came out with one in '98. It was taken off the market in 2002. Too many people said they got arthritis, and it got blown out of proportion. My dog is able to get a vaccine for Lyme disease. Why can't we? They have much better testing for our dogs. I just would like to make everybody aware of this, because if I would have known and been literate on this when it happened, I wouldn't be where I am today. Last week, my grandson and JK went for a nature walk at the school, the 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. I have the letter here that was sent home from the school. Within 2 minutes, the children and the staff were covered in ticks. Covered. And here's the letter to prove it. I won't bore you with it. I won't carry on to read it, but it is true. May be too late for me, but it's not too late for our children, our grandchildren, and the younger generation. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak here tonight.
Emily, and is Nina Jason in the room? Nina, you're next. Emily?
Thank you. My iPad's playing tricks on me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me tell my story to you today. My name's Emily Jameson. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Ottawa. I'm married to a supportive husband. I have a goofy dog, loving family, friends, and a career. I'm sorry, this is a little emotional. I love being active, going outdoors, being healthy, and I'm just like many of you in this room. Over 2 years ago, my life completely changed. I had this bump on my neck for about a month or so, and I didn't really think much of it. I had no knowledge or awareness, thank you, of what it could be, that being Lyme. I'd been hiking that fall in the Gatineaus, like many people in Ottawa do, and I also enjoyed my cottage frequently. Now, I can't say for certain if I had a tick bite or not, and I can't tell you that I didn't. But what I do know is that from that, I got very sick. About 2 months later, after dinner one night, my first symptoms started. My legs and face went completely numb, and I had the worst headache that I've ever had. My heart was racing. I was very scared, and I went to the emergency room here at the Ottawa General Hospital. That was my first of many trips to the ER. After a long wait, doctors thought maybe I had a stroke, but my symptoms were not normal. My numbness was jumping around my body. I had flu-like symptoms, an irregular heartbeat, and a really sore jaw. It just really didn't make very much sense. They sent me home that night, and they said nothing was wrong. I thought I was dying, and I stayed up most of the night because I just didn't know if I was actually going to wake up. That is one of the scariest feelings that you can have, not knowing what you have. And I went through that for not as long as many of you, but it was about 4 or 5 months. From there, I went to see many Canadian doctors, none of whom really thought or knew much about Lyme disease. I saw cardiologists, neurologists, extensive GPs, all those doctors at the ER, they all sent me home. I often think that if I'd actually talked to a Lyme literate doctorate at that time, I would not have any symptoms today. My GP diagnosed me for the first time with anxiety and depression. I was then put on antidepressants. These, of course, did nothing. He tried another kind, but it actually gave me worse anxiety to the point where I had to walk down the street with my hands over my ears. He kept thinking that I was depressed, and I kept telling him I wasn't. I was actually quite happy. I love my life, my dog. We got a new house. Everything was going well. But things just kept getting worse. New symptoms started to appear. I had lung pain, twitching, neck soreness, vertigo, and then finally the icing on the cake for me was extreme bone pain. And this made it very difficult to walk, and it made it hard to work, to be social. And I was confined to my home and much of the time my bed. This was only 4 months in, and I know a lot of you have gone through a lot more, but it was hell. I actually stopped believing what my doctor was telling me, and maybe this was kind of the best thing that ever happened to me. I started doing research on my own, and I could go into details about that, but for the sake of the fact that I have 5 minutes, I'll skip ahead. I asked my Canadian GP for a blood test, and simultaneously I sought out other opinions. Through my naturopathic doctor, I got her to send my blood work to IGeneX, which we've heard a lot about tonight. Obviously, it came back negative in Canada and positive in the States. My Canadian GP at the time didn't know what to think of the results, and he was very hesitant to put me on antibiotics. I gave up on our system, and I went to a doctor in the US who prescribed me antibiotics. This cost me thousands of dollars, like many of you, and it made it very hard to make ends meet. I herxed, and I was often bedridden, but within a month or so, a lot of my symptoms started to dissipate. My bone pain was gone, my sore jaw was gone, my neck pain was gone. After about 7 months on antibiotics, I decided to call it quits with antibiotics, and I still have symptoms, but I need to give my body a break. I went on herbal antimicrobial drops, and for those of you in the room that know the Cowden protocol, that is what I went on, and that is what I continue to be on. I order this from the US, and I go through the border, and I pay tax and duty on all those things that I actually purchased from the States. We can't find that here. And the border guards know everybody that goes up and down through the States. They know who my doctor is in the States. Financially, like many other Lyme patients, I've spent thousands of dollars on treatments outside and inside of Canada. It's frustrating that I have to pay these duty taxes when I am so broke. I do have a good job now, thank God, or else I wouldn't be able to afford this. I don't know people that do not have jobs or any financial backing. I don't know how they do it because it really costs. It's an expensive disease. I could go on, but my light's orange. So what I leave you with today is what I know is that the system in Canada failed me. It continues to fail me. I cannot talk to a doctor in Canada that is truly knowledgeable about Lyme. I hear rumors of doctors that have Lyme knowledge, but in Canada they are fearful of being shut down or put under a microscope. Other doctors simply follow a simple book or guideline that is outdated, costing people their jobs, family, and lives. My hope is that this conference brings positive actions and not just words. I hope my story remains a story of the past and not one of the future. Thanks.
Is Linda Kilgallen in the room? Right. Nina? Yes, thank you for supplying those.
Thanks. Good evening, bonsoir. My name is Nina Jameson. I'm a late-stage Lyme sufferer. I was bitten in 2006, the summer of, and I spent a lot of time outdoors enjoying all the flora and fauna, including endemic populations of ticks carrying Lyme disease. My first bite was at a music camp just north of Montreal at Lake McDonald. That's in Canada. And I was told many times that I couldn't possibly have Lyme disease. You wouldn't have gotten it from a place in Canada. Anyway, so I was covered in bug bites. I came home with flu-like symptoms. I had that urgency to urinate, meaning that they had actually migrated into my bladder. And upon my arrival home, I headed straight to the GP. GP, at the time in 2006, West Nile was the big thing. Lyme disease was unheard of. So UTI came back clean, no explanation for what was going on, things settled down. I was given the green light to go on a vacation with my young family. And we went to the Massachusetts-Connecticut border to a museum of flora and outdoor fauna. And guess what? Got another bug bite. So there were a lot of signs saying that, you have to be careful and heed warning, but I'm Canadian. I didn't have any idea about this stuff. Unfortunately, when we got into the car, my husband reached into his shorts thinking something was bothering him, and there it was, a tick. I'm like, hey, that's what they were talking about. Let me see that. Squished it in my fingers, put it away, mused about it. Hey, maybe we should get this tested, but anyway, nothing happened. 4 days later, we arrived at where our destination was, and I couldn't get off the couch. I couldn't move my head to the left or right. It felt like someone had beaten my feet with sticks, and that I had lived on my feet for my whole life. I started to get electrical activity flying up my foot, from my foot up my legs. I had pain in the bellies of my muscles. They started to undulate. The muscles were undulating like a wave. It became neurological so quickly. So I turned to my husband, and my big mistake was, we were in the States. I should have gone to a doctor in the States. They would have known what my problem was. But no, I headed back to Canada, to my GP of 15 years, who knew me well, and he'd be able to help me. Well, I went to him, and I had no idea. I thought I had Lou Gehrig's disease because I had been doing some research online. Anyways, he tried to reassure me that it was probably nothing, but he sent me to the neurologist. Neurologist said that if he were to think of all the twitching happening in his body, that'd make him crazy. I'm like, look, I don't think I have mental issues, but find me a psychiatrist. I need to get this out of my head. I have 4 children. They're counting on me. Their age range was between 5 and 9 years of age. They needed their mother. I was a speech pathologist with a growing practice. I was a teacher full-time. People depended on me. I couldn't be sick. Anyways, I was sent to an internist. The internist, he tried to do what he could. My GP, I had done some research online. I said, hey, let's get this IGeneX testing. brought one up. He's like, no, you're going to have to get another doctor to do that. So I went and got another doctor. When I came back with the results, which were very positive, including Babesia fish and Bartonella, and a few little couple of co-infections to go along with Lyme, I showed the results to the doctor, and he scolded me. He said to me, you went ahead and had this done? I'm like, you told me to get another doctor. Well, in the Limey world, I was fired, right? I was sent packing. Anyways, what happens after that, it's just a long list of problems, joint pain, areas that you can't explain what's going on. And when would something declare itself at this point? Well, I found a doc in Toronto, and he identified Lyme almost immediately, clinically. And he said, you know what, let's get you on a PICC line. 4 months later, my ELISA, after having had 10 times the ELISA in Canada, finally came back positive. February, I got a call from the public health saying, guess what, you have Lyme disease. I'm like, really? I said, okay. So they were interested at that point. Where were you? What did you do? When I mentioned the various places I had been, they're like, oh, the US. That's where you got it. Anyways, I'm seeing my red light here. We need a national strategy. We need doctors to be supported, not scrutinized. People need to back off. Let the doctors in Canada do their thing. Don't force them to the United States to practice. We have a Montreal doctor who can help us, and she practices in Plattsburgh, New York. We need some help here. And I'm really very grateful that this inaugural meeting is happening because I have hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Is Heather King in the room? All right.
Oh, there is a timer on there? Good. Okay, got it. Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Kilgallen. I also would like to thank everybody for giving me the opportunity to be here and for listening to what we have to say. I'm here because I feel that my life was stolen from me, and it was stolen from a disease that I didn't even know existed, a disease that I didn't even know I could or should protect myself from. It's so unfair. I was misdiagnosed, like almost all of you. I was consequently given the wrong treatments, which sent me very quickly downhill. Prior to getting sick, completely unaware the Lyme disease even existed. I thought if a tick got in you, the problem was it got stuck, so you had to rip it out. My third bite had a problem for me. I had been very active. I work anywhere from 12 to 14-hour shifts in construction. I spend every hour on my feet outside when I'm working. When I'm done work, I come home and work in one of the many gardens on a 10-acre property that I take care of. Never knew I had to protect myself. When I'm not doing that, I'm a Girl Guide leader with Pathfinders Girl Guide Canada. I take care of girls that are 14 to 17 years old, and I take them camping. We play a game called night tag. It's basically the opposite of hide and seek. So there's 15 of us. One goes and hides in the bush. It's called night tag because we don't play till dark. That girl crawls into a bush and hides, and she waits until one by one we all find her. When you find her, you don't pull her out of the bush. You crawl in with her. And you sit there in the dark in that bush and you wait for the rest of the team to find you. When they've all found you, yay, we start again. Now, for obvious reasons, you can imagine, never mind that I didn't know about Lyme, that I had to protect them from this. I can't search your child. She's a 12-year-old girl. How do I look at her for a tick in the dark nonetheless? We're not protecting them, and it's unacceptable. I can't even imagine the number of thousands of girls that we take camping every year, and we crawl through the bush with them. We thought our biggest fear was spiders, maybe mosquitoes, because they make us itch, right? Our first to fourth meeting every year in Girl Guides in my unit, because I was known as the camping unit. We had girls come from other areas to join me because I was the camping guru. One of those meetings in the first month is always with a nurse, because I believe in safety, preventive. Take care of them. That nurse covers every hazard that can happen to you at camp. Anything from sunstroke, fatigue, burns, everything. Never heard of a tick. Not in relation to Lyme disease, didn't know it was dangerous. I never protected myself, and I never protected those girls. And it's wrong, we know better. Now, I try to tell Girl Guides I'm no longer a leader because I'm unworthy, basically. I don't have the mental capacity to take 15 girls camping and to be their guardian. I can't take care of myself. I tried to go back to Girl Guides to say, this is why I'm out. We have to be changing this. These girls, they're in danger. Nothing has been done. I've been saying it for 3 years. Not a single talk through Girl Guides. Nobody's invited me to talk because it doesn't exist, right? It's so wrong. It's criminal. Then it comes to the health system and how I feel it failed me. When I was diagnosed, the first initial diagnosis, they thought I was having an allergic reaction. Sorry, my tremors are going to start in here. I'm going to try and finish quick. When they thought I had the allergic reaction, of course, they shot me full of steroids right in the clinic. When I walked into that clinic, I'm going to example. I was going like this, clawing at myself, begging her, please make it stop. I feel like I'm standing in a fire ant hill after being poured with itching powder. They wrote me up as patient is trying to remove skin from entire body. I was pulling out my eyebrows trying to remove the skin from my face. When they shot me full of that steroids, I got worse. They sent me to the hospital, 3 hours on an IV drip, steroids. Sent me home with prescriptions for steroids and an EpiPen. 6 weeks of my symptoms getting worse until I could press into my skull softer than in my cheek. I went from working 128 hours in 8 days to less than 8 weeks later, I couldn't stand up, walk, or talk. That introduction of steroids dropped my immune system and just boosted those little babies into army in me. They almost killed me. I see my red lights on, I got a little bit off track, but we need the information out there. We have to stop this from happening to other people, and we have to stop, as everybody here has said, the ridicule from doctors. I've been kicked out of offices. I have been yelled at my own doctor's office, and he said, do not ever mention Lyme in my office again. He kicked me out. I asked him for my records. They don't exist. There are no symptoms in my file for those 8 weeks of going in with those. I have almost every single symptom in the Why Can't I Get Better book. Not one is in my file. It has to change.
Heather.
Hello. All your stories are really touching. Thank you for sharing them. My heart's going so fast. I used to work full-time, clean houses part-time, dance, hike, have a gym membership. In 2009, that all went away. I became bedridden, and I felt utterly useless. My name is Heather King, and I was unknowingly bit by a tick and infected with Lyme disease and a plethora of co-infections in 2009 when I was doing a photo shoot at Bruce Pit, which is a dog walking park in Ottawa. Within 2 years, I doubled my body weight. My hands and joints would swell to the size of baseball mitts. I could no longer walk up a flight of stairs. I could no longer read a book. The worst was the reoccurring shingles once a month and the constant searing neck pain, as well as the heart palpitations, chest pain. I felt like I was losing brain cells. I felt myself growing stupid. The migrating joint pain was severe. I felt like I was losing my mind. I still do. The pain in my neck and back were so extreme I had to chop off my hair and cut the necks out of all my t-shirts and sweaters. It hurt too much to wear them. Every day I was terrified I was going to die. Imagine going through this for 7 years, living alone, no family, no neighbors. It took 3 years for a diagnosis. I got the first tier Canadian blood test done for Lyme, which was negative. The second tier came back ELISA reactive. My family doctor at the time said, I don't know what this means, and threw it in my face. It was then I contacted Jim Wilson from CanLyme, and if it wasn't for him and the USA Lyme doctor I wouldn't be here today. Jim Wilson described to me that ELISA reactive means positive. I got reinfected on March 23rd, 2014, when I did a photo shoot inside of a barn for a friend, and I didn't think it through. Inside the barn are animals, manure, field mice, ticks live on field mice. Got home, took off my winter gear to find what looked like a bullseye rash on my ankle. No one believed I could get Lyme in the winter, technically spring, but every symptom returned. Recently, I couldn't afford treatment in the USA, so I was forced to wean myself off my cocktail of antibiotics, 65% done in 3 months. After 3.5 years of being on long-term antibiotics, going off them was the worst mistake I ever made. Lyme started attacking my heart again, my joints, so many symptoms that were minimal or gone returned with a vengeance. Long-term antibiotic treatment may be viewed with the same stigma as chemotherapy is for cancer patients. In most cases, the patient's survival rate is significantly improved, as is their quality of life versus the disease. I haven't been able to work since 2010. I've lost so many friends, and I have no family that lives close enough or wants to contribute to my care. I have to rely on what little ODSP sends me, and their package is not yet tailored to cater to someone with chronic Lyme. What we need is obvious, educated, compassionate doctors, long-term antibiotics covered in Canada, awareness, better testing, for this to be listed as an actual disability. I find it incredibly odd that my chiropractor, my naturopath, massage therapist, eye doctor, pain doctor, gynecologist, and my dentist know more about Lyme disease and chronic Lyme disease than my half a dozen family doctors. I've gone through and every doctor I've seen at the emergency. These people, the above mentioned, have treated me with utmost respect, compassion, support, more than I can say. They treat me like a human being. One thing I'd like to mention also is Dr. Ernie Murakami. This man is a saint and has saved the lives of thousands suffering from this horrible disease. He dedicated his entire life to helping those with Lyme and still does to this day. I think they should end the disgrace and show this man the recognition and reinstate his license. Currently, I'm my 5th infectious disease doctor who says chronic Lyme doesn't exist. The last time I went to the hospital a couple months ago, I was told to get out and go to the USA for help. I'm wasting Canadian taxpayers' dollars. In closing, we need to end the stigma surrounding Lyme treatment in all stages and move forward towards total and comprehensive care, planning for all who battle this disease regardless of the stage they are at.
Thank you, Heather. Catherine? Is Jennifer Kravis, all right. Catherine?
Give me a second. My name is Katherine Ginella. I'm an RN and former research nurse at McMaster University. In June 2013, I was hiking with a friend in Charleston Lake Provincial Park, not too far from here. Because there were tick warning signs at the trailhead, we checked for ticks several times during that hike. At that time, I thought I would surely see or feel a tick bite, and I knew very little about the disease itself. I did not know that ticks can be very small and stealth. They like to hide and climb up, that their bite is usually painless, and that Lyme disease can be debilitating. 10 days after that hike, I developed sudden and severe flu-like symptoms. That would be my last day of work for 3 months straight, and in total, almost a year unpaid. Over the next 6 weeks, I would develop a page-long list of symptoms and visit my family doctor, ER, or clinic every few days, despite previous excellent health. All of my symptoms were attributed to infectious mononucleosis, including meningitis, ongoing severe headaches, debilitating fatigue, a circular rash, which was only partially visible to me, and a strange migrating rash. When my family doctor finally agreed to order the Lyme test, I had lost 18 pounds and had developed many neurological and cognitive symptoms. It took 2 weeks for my test result to come back. During those 2 weeks, I developed Bell's palsy. That's me with Bell's palsy. A painful shoulder palsy requiring many months of physiotherapy, and I spent a week in hospital undergoing investigations for autoimmune disorders, neurological testing, and many other possible infectious diseases. I was treated with high-dose steroids and discharged home. After seeing my doctor for blurred vision, she informed me that my Lyme test was indeed positive. I was her first Lyme patient, but not to worry, she said. Although Lyme disease is difficult to diagnose, it's easy to treat. I was also referred to an infectious disease specialist, not knowing the strange world of Lyme disease management that lay ahead. My ID doctor informed me that I required only a few weeks of oral antibiotics and that any further follow-up would be done by my family doctor. When the rheumatologist and neurologist from my recent hospitalization saw my positive Lyme test, they both agreed that according to the current treatment criteria, I should receive a few weeks of IV antibiotics. With this treatment, I initially developed new symptoms, but eventually recovered enough to be able to work a few hours a week. Unfortunately, when my treatment ended, my symptoms returned, and week after week, my health was again deteriorating. When I returned to my doctor, I explained my declining health, as well as new symptoms such as chest pain and palpitations. He informed me that I had received more than adequate treatment, that I could expect to have lingering symptoms for up to a year, that now I had post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome, and he does not treat that. He also explained that research has proven that long-term antibiotics are dangerous and ineffective in treating Lyme disease and could lead to resistant strains of infections or possibly death. Despite not having significant pain issues, he mentioned that after a year I would likely be diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I was shocked. I had an acute infectious disease where treatment was working. I was being denied any further treatment, and my health was declining to the point of not being able to work again. Evidence-based medicine takes into account the strength of evidence, the severity of disease, the individual response to treatment, the risk of treatment, as well as the risk of not treating. I knew what was coming down the road if I didn't get treatment. I was not treated based on these criteria. I was then forced to do what most Lyme patients do. I sought out alternatives. I saw a naturopath and a U.S. Lyme specialist, both of whom had a far greater understanding of Lyme disease than any doctor I had seen. I was also fortunate enough to find a second Canadian ID doctor who agreed to treat me with long-term antibiotics. These antibiotics alleviated my symptoms and allowed me to work, parent, rock climb with my teenage daughter, and eventually recover. The same antibiotics are freely prescribed to thousands of patients with minor skin conditions, and yet my own treatment felt like a covert operation. I don't like to take antibiotics, and in the 18 months of my secondary treatment, we tried to wean or stop them several times, only to have my symptoms return and my health decline. Finally, last May, I was able to stop them without my symptoms returning. I have now been off all treatment for a year and finally have my life back. Without treatment, I can't imagine where I would be right now. If I need treatment in the future, I will find it from a doctor with adequate knowledge and freedom to treat in whatever country that may be. If this federal framework is successful, that country will be Canada. I just want to say also that this is a visible sign of Lyme, but this is happening to people's brains, it's happening to their entire nervous system, it's happening to their heart, and you can't see it. But, fortunately for me, I had a visible sign. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Jennifer, and is Linda Ladlaw in the room? Linda Ladlaw. Okay, perfect. It's all right, no need to get up right away. I just want to check with our technician. Eric, how are the recording levels? Are they okay? All right, because people have a tendency to speak a bit off the microphone. So, all right. Over to you.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Kravis from Oakville, Ontario. I am a lawyer and I was a partner in one of Canada's top law firms. I then worked as a successful bank executive. 10 years ago, I developed very strange and debilitating neurological symptoms out of the blue. I saw many, many, many doctors, and I had literally hundreds of tests. I was told that I might have Guillain-Barré syndrome, MS, depression, a brain tumor, anxiety, or bipolar. I was eventually diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia that all the doctors agreed was triggered by a mysterious bacteria or virus. My ELISA test was negative, and every doctor insisted there was no possible way it could be Lyme disease, despite me having over 60 symptoms consistent with Lyme. I was refused a Western blot despite begging to pay for it. I have a 40-page OHIP summary charging taxpayers for every other possible obscure test imaginable, but I have not been allowed to pay for the one test that might have helped me. I became completely bedridden at age 36. I watched seasons change, weeks and months pass from my room. I couldn't read or watch TV. I only saw my girls who were 2 and 4 when they sat on my bed to watch TV. And I was awake, but I could not open my eyes or talk. due to this crippling and profound fatigue that I cannot explain. It was a nightmare. I had to say no to my girls every day. No, I can't play with you. I can't bathe you. I can't watch your game. I can't push you on the swing. I can't play with you. I missed years of their lives. I lived in a terrifying fog of pain and despair, and I was barely living. I endured daily crippling pain, debilitating, constant fatigue, explosive migraines, burning, stabbing, neuropathic pain, muscle and joint pain, numbness, tingling, stuttering, brain fog, seizures, vision changes, hair loss, twitching, spasms, early menopause, drenching night sweats, and lethargy so bad I did not recognize myself. Lyme has been completely financially devastating. I went from a successful breadwinner for my family to a convulsing, crippled mess that spent weeks, months, and years dragging myself from the couch to my bed. My lost wages are well over $3 million. I sought treatment for fibromyalgia. For years, I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on every possible treatment. Nothing worked. A U.S. clinic tested me for Lyme at Quest Labs and IGeneX. Both were negative. After 5 years, a new doctor said I probably had Lyme, but explained that testing is often inaccurate. He put me on a couple weeks of antibiotics and said my test would probably turn seropositive, and it did. And just 3 days ago, after 10 years, I finally got a positive Canadian test for Bartonella. Testing is a big problem. When I got my diagnosis, I was subsequently fired by 3 family doctors, and when I was referred to an infectious disease doctor, she kicked me out of her office within the first 2 minutes. I was forced to go to the US and pay out of pocket. I got 2 years of long-term antibiotics, including 1 year of a PICC line with intravenous, and these drugs transformed my life. For the first time in 8 years, I experienced dramatic improvements. My brain fog lifted. I could recognize and remember faces again. I was able to read. My stutter disappeared. I no longer have to nap every single day. I felt such a profound awakening after being shrouded in a fog of pain, fatigue, and confusion. I still cannot work, but I can get out of bed most days. I can volunteer and cook for my family again. I can drive longer distances. I can walk my dogs and watch my kids play sports. I can travel without crashing. I still struggle every day with fatigue and constant pain. I'm told I will probably never be cured. I don't know if I will ever work again, but I'm so incredibly grateful to have a life. My US doctor and my antibiotic treatment saved me. Lyme is horrific. It's insidious. It sucks the life out of you, and it is a living nightmare. It has robbed me of my career and the ability to be the wife and mother that I want to be for my family. Since I was 14, I have been a hardworking, productive, contributing taxpayer. Now I hate it. I'm a drain on the system, and I live on CPP disability payments. My insurance company cut me off. And even worse, my 11-year-old child is now sick with numerous debilitating symptoms. Her Canadian ELISA is negative. She's not allowed a Western blot, yet her US test shows Lyme positive according to CDC. Despite all that, it's been 3 years and she remains untreated. Doctors are scared to even discuss Lyme. And as a mother, I live with the terror of wondering what will her future be like. Lyme is not rare. It is the complete and total opposite. In addition to myself, my daughter, and my dog, I personally have 8 close friends and family members, 4 of them children, who've contracted Lyme. Not a single one received a positive ELISA. Every single one had to fight with their doctors for a diagnosis. My niece had a classic bullseye rash. My sister had to go to 4 different doctors before one agreed that it was Lyme disease and would treat her. How many Canadians are being missed? In conclusion, it is extremely painful to look back and realize all of this could have been avoided had I been quickly diagnosed and properly treated. And I can only hope and pray that my daughter will someday be able to be properly treated here with compassion and care. Thank you.
Linda. Next up, I think, is Madeleine Lapointe-Miller. Am I right on that? Okay. Linda, please.
Hi. My name is Linda Ladlaw, and I'm a professor at the University of Alberta. I'm here for my daughter, Shen, who is 13 years old. She's come with me even though she's ill because we both know how important it is to tell her story to you. My daughter spent the first year of her life in an orphanage in China. When she was adopted, her orphanage gave her new shoes for a good road ahead, and the future seemed very bright for her in Canada. And it was for a while, until she got Lyme disease when she was 4 years old. Then suddenly Canada wasn't such a good place for her to be because here doctors don't seem to want to treat this illness. We can't figure out why. It doesn't make any sense. Her neurologist tells me that over the years, she's had $1 million workup. Many days in hospital, many diagnostic tests, and many tests for very rare genetic illnesses which she does not have. When she got sick again a few weeks ago, one of her specialists insisted she be admitted to the hospital for another week of extensive testing. All of those tests have been negative, as they always have been. That week in hospital didn't help her at all because they aren't looking for the right things. Shen's Canadian Lyme tests have never been positive, and that means she can't access Canadian treatment. I told her doctors that I'd welcome them finding anything else. A new diagnosis would mean that we could actually get treatment for her here in Canada. My daughter sometimes says that she wishes she had cancer instead of Lyme because the cancer kids get help. When Shen was 5 years old, we traveled to the United States where she had different tests. The doctors diagnosed Lyme disease and 2 other tick-borne co-infections. Shen got better, but as you may know, treatments must be cumulative to get rid of multiple tick-borne co-infections. Lyme treatments in the US haven't been all that expensive, certainly a bargain compared to all the medical care she's received in Canada. And had she been diagnosed earlier, her present relapse might have been avoided. Now her Lyme is difficult to treat and may be what infectious diseases doctors call post-treatment Lyme disease, except that she always gets better when she's treated. Canadian doctors won't treat her illness, although they are sympathetic, and many of her doctors seem to agree that Shen has Lyme. Sometimes doctors will prescribe for a few weeks, then they say they can't treat her any longer. When they speak to me, these doctors won't look me in the eye. One doctor left that sort of message as a voicemail. And that's it. I've asked to access better testing, since it's possible my daughter was exposed to a different strain than is being tested for in Canada. I've asked for her to receive a SPECT scan, as that could be more diagnostic, but no one wants to do that either. In my day job, other than being a mom, I work as a researcher. In research, if you observe an unexpected response, something different from what you were expecting, that's often a sign of an interesting research puzzle. If you dismiss the response because you just don't understand why, then you're not really doing your job. In spite of all the documentation in the Alberta health system of Shen's response to the right treatment, there seems to be nothing we can do. Alberta will pay for a lot of expensive specialists to watch her recover or to watch her get sicker, but we can't seem to get any help for the actual illness. This is crazy. One doctor recently told me that many illnesses are treated based on the response to treatment, even when research doesn't show why it works. Doctors use their clinical expertise, but it never seems to work that way with treatment for Lyme disease in Canada. One infectious diseases doctor who observed my daughter's dramatic turnaround after beginning treatment observed that the treatment seemed to be working, but she wouldn't provide anything in writing, nor name the disease. The problem isn't with the results. The problem isn't with my daughter. The problem is with a medical system that has failed her. Shen is still gravely ill, but she is here today as an advocate for herself and for the children and adults we know who exist in the same uncertain predicament. We thank you for your attention and concern, and all those whose good road ahead will, with your help, include a medical system that recognizes and takes action on the myriad complexities of Lyme disease in Canada. Thank you.
This is a challenge. Standing up is a challenge. Okay, I had hoped for 2.5 decades to have the opportunity to do this. And here I am, and I'm almost incapable of doing anything. My whole family's in a flare. I'm a caregiver for 3 other adults, and I feel older than my mother, who's over 100. I used to be a public speaker, a teacher, a social worker. I've been taking care of my children for their whole lives and watching them decline. Most people have children and figure they're going to see them grow up and have a life and develop those wonderful talents and abilities. And I have watched them lose and lose and lose. One is 30, the other's 28. They're both home, and they're more disabled now than they ever have been. And what's ironic about this There's a lot that's ironic. In 1980, I got a puppy from Manotick, and I took her home and took a whole bunch of ticks, like about 100 or 200 off her, and the vet said, there could be neurological problems in your dog. Oh, I said, I'd better take the ticks off. So I did. I proceeded to get quite ill, and I thought it was my chemical sensitivities and food sensitivities and a whole bunch of other things. I became disabled. I couldn't teach, I couldn't do anything, but I came out of it somehow, miraculously. Then I met my husband, and we went on a honeymoon to Old Lyme, Connecticut. Because there was a horse farm there that I'd wanted to see my whole life. And I went, and they said, gee, we're really sorry, but our horses are sick, and my husband's dying, and, so look at them now because they won't be around for much longer. And we went home, and I got pregnant. And the next year I had my daughter, and we nearly died. Whatever. So we kept on, and we lived in Stittsville, and we were outside a lot. And when my daughter was 5, she had a tick on her. She was in the backyard the day before, right? Give her a bath every day. We went to our family doctor in Orleans, where we live now, and that wonderful woman actually, well, it had been on PBS the day before, diagnosed her with a 6-inch bullseye rash, fever of 102, very sick little 5-year-old, and gave her treatment. 10 days of antibiotics, because that's what you do with a sick kid, right? And we then proceeded on a long road of getting sicker and sicker, and a school board that went, your kids are a problem. You're a teacher, keep them home and homeschool them. They were diagnosed with everything from Tourette's to OCD to Asperger's syndrome. And eventually, my daughter just stopped going to school. Again, keep her home, we don't know what to do with her. My son persevered, and we kept him going and went through a whole lot of hell. And they're home, barely able to move. These 2 kids who were tested 180 IQ. I wanted to be so eloquent today, but everyone else has been, so it doesn't matter. You just need to hear that many lives, including my children's and mine, have been destroyed. And the hope is pretty not there. We're all on limited income. I'm 66 years old, and I have to take care of them and my 100-year-old mother, in spite of how sick I am. And what the medical system did to me, beware. Because what they do is either tell you have MS or that you're mentally ill. So I spent 15 years on drugs and was 220 pounds and nearly dead. And I got myself off, and I've been going through 5 years of indescribable hell getting off those poisons. And here I am, alive, because I have to be. But I don't have much hope, and we need hope. And my son and daughter don't have any hope. And we need hope. So this is what this is about. They couldn't be here because they couldn't handle it, okay? But we need to find a way to be hopeful and have treatment even for people like my son and daughter. Thank you.
Madeline, you were very eloquent. Marne Leage, and is Patrick Leach in the room? Patrick Leach? Okay. Thank you.
Oh, the night gets more emotional as it goes on. First of all, I want to thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to be at this conference and to speak. My name is Marne Leage. I'm a wife. I'm a mother of 3 beautiful girls. I'm a business partner. I love the outdoors. I'm playing sports, both indoor and outdoor, summer and winter. I love life. I don't have Lyme disease. My daughter does. My oldest daughter, Brooke, who's almost 14, shares the same passion for life that I do. But to my heartbreak, she's sitting on the sidelines. She's a very down-to-earth girl, and she used to be energetic and vivacious, and that is until it came to a sudden halt. Brooke used to be a competitive swimmer, enjoying over 20 hours a week at the pool. Academically, she was at the top of her class, and she managed to maintain friendships in each of her surroundings. She loved hiking and spending time outdoors at the lake. Highlights for her were spending a week at summer camps and racing the camp counselors to maintain the title of fastest swimmer, until she got sick. We knew right away that something was not right, and other parents around me at the pool also realized it. She was swimming slower, adding time, significant time onto her races, and she was falling behind rapidly, and she couldn't keep up anymore. We had her at the doctor within 30 days of the day we suspect that she was bitten, which was in an endemic area. And over the next 4.5 months, despite numerous tests, ultrasounds, and CT scans, the doctors weren't able to detect what was wrong. The one test that was never offered was a Lyme disease test, despite my numerous requests. We were refused at the walk-in clinic, our pediatrician, our emergency room, and finally the infectious disease unit. We were told Lyme is not common here, and it was the wrong time of year. After my persistent infectious disease, it was ordered, but it came back negative. My daughter was barely able to get out of bed, unable to read, unable to watch TV. Our final offer from the infectious disease doctor was to either see a sports doctor for her fevers, sore muscles, and swelling joints, despite her lack of activity, or a psychiatrist. It was suggested to us from the head infectious disease doctor that our daughter no longer wanted to swim competitively, and she didn't know how to tell us, so she was making up her symptoms. This was not an acceptable answer. I then requested a clinical diagnosis based on her symptoms, which matched the documents I printed from our Canadian government websites. But I was told that a clinical diagnosis only occurred when a bullseye rash was present. This is contradicting. We have reportable co-infections in Manitoba that do not present a bullseye rash. How can it be that this was not considered for my daughter's undiagnosed ailment? How could it not be from infectious disease to suggest that? A few more tests that were unrelated to Lyme disease were ordered from the infectious disease, and we were told not to make an appointment for a follow-up visit with them, and I would be called with the results. I never received that phone call and was refused copies of the test results when I went down in person. All I wanted was for my daughter to get better, and this forced us to seek a medical diagnosis and treatment out of our province at our expense, thousands of dollars later. And it's a diagnosis that won't be treated here in Canada. Our healthcare system failed the future of my 13-year-old daughter. Since this diagnosis, our lives have drastically changed. I no longer work, but I become a caregiver, a nutritionist, a therapist, a tutor, a researcher, and an advocate. My daughter's attendance at school is sporadic, and she has not been able to attend since November. This is a crucial stage of development in her life, both academically and socially. Over the past year, our Manitoba Lyme support group has almost doubled in size, and we've become a family united by the simple fact that all of us have been dismissed by our healthcare system. Most of our members of our group have gone several years without a proper diagnosis and treatment, and their bodies show the destruction of Lyme disease. They're too tired and weak to fight this, but I'm not. This is the time for change, and we want to have a role in it. I've attended this conference to learn as much as I can with an open mind. And I hope that all the people that have the powers to make decisions will listen to our stories. Because we, the patients and caregivers of Lyme, are not going anywhere. And we're growing in numbers, and we're not going to be ignored. The fact that this conference has been put together and people have been brought in from across the country indicates to me that you know Lyme disease is more prevalent than has been admitted in the past. We insist that you allow us, the ones that are living with Lyme every day, to be a part of this change. We want representation in the federal framework. We want the medical profession to be educated and to offer clinical diagnosis in the absence of adequate lab testing. And this is important. We want acknowledgement and treatment of chronic Lyme disease. When you listen to our stories, I want you to replace our faces with those that are close to you, your spouse, your sibling, your children, or your parents, and make the necessary changes that's going to save lives. Thank you.
So my question is, how many other people have been misdiagnosed with an autoimmune disease or left with an idiopathic diagnosis when in fact they are probably struggling with Lyme disease or some other pathogenic organism as the trigger? I'm not a doctor, but I am smart, and so is my body. However, I am tired, extremely tired of being dismissed and having to figure out the path to wellness myself. We need and deserve specialists in functional integrative medicine and vector-borne illnesses. It is our right as Canadian citizens. Thank you.
Donna, please. Jel Hugo. All right. Donna?
Okay, I'm losing my voice, sorry. Good evening, everyone. My name is Donna Lugar, and I'm from Nova Scotia. I was clinically diagnosed with tick-borne diseases in 2011 after many years of steadily increasing symptoms that affected all systems. At the time of my clinical diagnosis, I had 48 symptoms. I am very happy for this opportunity to speak about some of the things I think need to be changed, and I truly hope that those that can affect change are listening to what we have to say. As the Nova Scotia contact person for CanLyme and the originator of the Lyme disease in Nova Scotia and the Maritime Provinces Facebook page, as well as the fact that I run a support group, I regularly receive emails and telephone calls from people suspecting that they may have Lyme. From the conversations with others dealing with tick-borne diseases, I've come up with some issues that need to be resolved. All doctors need to be at least aware of the basics, such as that the EM rash is a definitive sign of Lyme, but not everyone presents with an EM rash, that the ELISA has sensitivity and specificity limitations, and a negative result does not necessarily mean you don't have Lyme, that co-infections are becoming the norm, and that disease-carrying ticks can now be found just about everywhere. Properly trained doctors are required throughout the country that can clinically diagnose and treat all stages of Lyme and tick-borne diseases. Lyme is not just a bullseye rash and flu-like symptoms. It can be so much more. More information needs to be available about co-infections. In Nova Scotia, several possible co-infections have now been found in ticks. Knowledge about these is limited. Doctors should be allowed to treat their patients how they see fit. In other words, they should be allowed to follow either the IDSA or ILIDE's guidelines, and they should be allowed to treat until symptoms are eradicated. More education is required in medical schools regarding tick-borne diseases, as they are a worldwide problem. As we can all agree, the quicker tick-borne diseases are diagnosed, the better. So GPs need to stop separating symptoms and look at what could be causing them all, rather than sending a patient to various specialists for each individual symptom. This delays and sometimes prevents a proper diagnosis and treatment. This delay obviously impacts the patient, but can also end up costing the government a considerable amount of money, which could be better spent elsewhere. On a final note, I would like to thank the organizers of this conference for allowing the opportunity for us to speak, but better yet, to give us an opportunity to meet some of the people that has helped me through this journey. I'm not sure where I would be today without their support. If it wasn't for social media and Facebook and things like that, we would not have any of this information. And most of these people here are only here because they're aware of it through Facebook. These are the people that aren't on Facebook and are not as social media savvy, are sitting at home dying. And at least we are here and have this ability to speak, and thank you.
I just want to make sure we haven't missed anybody. Susan Faber? No? I just want to make a final check. Elaine Husband? Okay. Connie Jean Layton? All right, let's go to our final speaker. Jel Hugo, please.
Thank you. I'm going to try not to be a basket case. No guarantees. Alrighty. I am a caregiver to my son. His name is Connor. He would have attended, but he's too ill. So I'm here to represent him and the rest of our family that it's affected horribly. I don't need the Lyme knowledgeable people to imagine, but the rest of you could imagine that this has happened or is happening to your child. Connor was always active, always outside. He was a boy, traveling in summer camps. We spent half the summers in New Brunswick, the rest of the time outdoors in Alberta. Since the age of 13, he came home off the school bus and went straight to bed. Headache, numbness, light sensitivity, and fatigue. We thought it was the flu. We waited a few days, took him to the doctor. The doctor thought it was a flu. Ended up, we didn't find any positive results. The doctor recommended a healthy diet and drink lots of water. So this went on. The symptoms persisted for the next 2 years. Worse, the head pressure, the eye pressure, the joint pain, muscle weakness, the brain fog, profound fatigue. I sound like every other story, and I don't know how doctors have not caught on to this yet. Wow. Digestive and insomnia issues. Connor was sent to an ophthalmologist, and then neurologist, and then another neurologist, and they decided he had Chiari malformation. So he underwent the 5-hour invasive brain surgery. That was a misdiagnosis. The next year, he was diagnosed with chronic sinusitis and had quite a detailed surgery, but that didn't help anything. He continued to see his family doctors and neurologists. No improvement except copious amounts of debilitating prescriptions. Connor was then directed to the headache specialist clinic in Calgary. Even though his list of symptoms far exceeded his head pressure and his eye pressure and any head-related things, he was diagnosed with daily chronic migraines. I don't know about you guys, but that's all new to me. I didn't know that was a thing you could be sick with. Anyways, they continued to give him prescriptions. Nothing worked. Connor was then referred to the psychologist, the next typical step in our journey. Connor was tested for lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, colitis, allergies, cleared of everything. His mounting symptoms have left him disabled at the age of 19. He can no longer work, attend school, most days doesn't leave the house. And it was a friend, and never a doctor through all of this, through all these years. It was a friend who said, hey, he sounds like what my wife has, and she has Lyme disease. So after 7 years of illness, he was tested in Canada. That was negative. I sent it out of country. He was positive. Now, he is tested positive for different infections at 4 out-of-country labs. But Canada is hell-bent on saying our testing is gold standard and there's nothing better. Canada cannot discount every other lab in the world. You don't have that leg to stand on. Well, Connor's test came back negative, his ELISA test, and his doctor was more than smug to tell us that, because I had to push to get that test done. I asked to be referred to somebody, an infectious disease specialist, somewhere to address my son's failing health. Well, she turned to me and gave me a lecture about wasting taxpayers' dollars and how dare I, and she's not about to refer us to anywhere else. And then she turned to my son, and I quote, she said, go home, lose some weight, and work on getting yourself better. And she left the exam room. I came this close to driving my car through that hospital front door. Nope. So Connor's neurologist, after seeing a picture of his EM rash and seeing his out-of-country results, he referred him to infectious disease doctors in Calgary. We were really hopeful. But actually, infectious disease doctors in Calgary refused to see my son, citing that his Canadian test was negative, the out-of-country tests were not relevant, and they had nothing further to add. So to this day, I don't know, is this how ID works? Infectious disease doesn't have any cases to report because they don't see the sick patients? Yeah. That's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool way to operate. Anyways, our medical system has spent hundreds and thousands, if not more dollars, denying the prevalence of Lyme disease instead of treating the people with Lyme disease. Connor's 9 years sick now. He is chronic. Lyme disease patients are starving for proper treatment. We support causes around the world, but Canada cannot support its own ill citizens. We need to educate our doctors. We need to teach them how to diagnose clinically and recognize the symptoms of Lyme disease. We need reliable testing methods. We need proper, effective, long-term treatment for our sick children, sisters, husbands, brothers, aunts, uncles, grandparents, babies. They need effective, reliable treatment. And we do need awareness beyond social media. We need some print. We need it in every town across Canada. I do want to leave with one quote. In the fullness of time, the mainstream handling of chronic Lyme disease will be viewed as one of the most shameful episodes in the history of medicine, because elements of academic medicine, elements of government, and virtually the entire insurance industry have colluded to deny a disease. Thank you.
Thank you for so generously and courageously sharing your stories this evening. I hope that my time limitations, well, I hope they didn't leave any ill feeling. We certainly wanted to hear all your stories, and you so generously contributed those this evening. We will do our best tomorrow at right after lunch to give you a sense of some of the themes that have emerged in all of the rooms. So you'll get a very quick synopsis. We're getting together to kind of collate the themes that we heard over the course of the evening. We start at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And I'm getting a signal from Eric in the back that we cannot leave this room right now for 5 minutes. Oh, okay. I'll flip this around. Anybody that didn't get a chance to speak, if you would like to share a story, maybe a minute or two, come on down. We have time.
I was just diagnosed officially by IGeneX, of course, about a week and a half ago. I have 2 sons, 3.5 and 1.5. And the whole last year and a half of their lives have been having mom in bed. I'm sorry, this is why I didn't want to speak. I feel like every doctor I've ever seen in the past year and a half has let me down. Everyone except for my naturopath. And now I have to spend money again that we don't have to go to BC to get antibiotics that will help make me become a mom again. Thank you. I'm actually out of tears. I have no idea what else to say. You guys have said it all already. I relate to so many of you. And I just wanted to reiterate that something really needs to be done. Something really needs to change. This isn't okay. We shouldn't have to rely on the states. We shouldn't have to rely on another province. We shouldn't have to spend more money out of our own pocket after we've just spent the money on the test for you to diagnose ourselves and then still not be able to prove that that test is positive. Anyway, I think you get the gist. I'm from Winnipeg, and my doctor just put me on 4 weeks of antibiotics after I told him that I wasn't going to leave the room unless he did. Anyway, thank you. That's all I really had to say.
Hi, my name's Robin Lamont, and we all have stories that are so much the same, and I have like a list of people I want to hug before I leave. Which brings me to think something that we haven't been able to talk about tonight. There's so many critical issues, but our secondary methods of transmission, because definitely in utero, we know there's a lot of research about that, But I also need to speak to the point of the fact about its sexual transmission, which a lot of people ignore, particularly, I don't hear about it in the media, but I can tell you about it in my family because I gave it to my husband. So we're both post-treatment and doing better, but I feel that's an issue that needs to be brought up, hopefully in every room, because it is part of the problem that we don't know all the ways that it's being transmitted. So I'm not going to add my story. They're all so similar and so ghastly, but everybody remember that's an issue as well. Thanks.
I want to make sure that those that haven't had a chance can get a chance.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Hornby Gillespie, and I'm born in Montreal, raised in Brockville in the Thousand Islands, which I understand is highly endemic for Lyme. But I lived almost 10 years down in Maryland, and I did not know anything about Lyme disease. I was infected at the time that I gave birth to my son, and I very quickly became ill. And then, as we all know, we all have the same story about the migratory pains. After 9 months, I finally got treated by Dr. Dan Cameron, who's president of the International Lyme and Associated Diseases Society in the United States. And then my experience, if there's a silver lining, is that all the horrors that I had gone through with the long list of doctors enabled me to not waste time getting my children treated when they were bitten and infected. And I would brag to all my friends, all my American friends, about how great the Canadian healthcare system is. And surely Canada's going to come up with a vaccine or a cure. I couldn't wait to get back home. And when I came here, I was so horrified to learn that the test that they use, the ELISA, is still being used in Canada, but they did away with it in the United States over a decade ago because it's so inadequate. And then here, Canadians, we have coverage in the United States because my husband's American. I don't know how Canadians do it. We paid $14,000 a month, a portion of that, but that was what insurance was being billed. I know you're paying financially. I'm praying that they come up with a cure and a vaccine because, as somebody else mentioned, and we all know, we have it for our dogs, but not for us.
Okay, so just speak right into it. Hello. So my name's Janet, and I have the same story as everybody. I think I probably got Lyme 25 years ago, and but I finally got really, really sick to the point where I couldn't work anymore a couple of years ago. And eventually, I was lucky, I guess. I have an environmental doctor who sent my blood to the States and was like, yep, you have Lyme. That's what I thought. So, but I'm really interested in how this is going to be treated, because at first, I was really optimistic, because at first antibiotics were incredibly effective. I could only tolerate them once about every 2 days. But for the first 2 weeks, I was like, I'm done, I'm cured. This is amazing, right? I haven't felt this great in years. And then for some reason, after, when I kept doing antibiotics beyond a month, I got really, really sick again. And it's not clear. I think it's really complicated. And then I started researching the issue of how to get well. And I found that there's some really interesting naturopathic approaches that have been suggested. I didn't have the guts to. There was a book I read by this guy Booner. Probably people have heard of him. He's in the States. And I didn't have the guts to do it on my own. So I went to a naturopath who I spent $600 on, and it yielded nothing. And then eventually, fairly recently, I started seeing a traditional Chinese medicine doctor here in Ottawa. And I just want to mention this because I don't know. I'm not cured yet. I've only been seeing him, I say yet, hopefully. I've only been seeing him for a couple of months. But I have to say that the stuff he's done for me, it's the first time that I have had some improvement with no pain. Like all the other treatments, it would cause horrible die-off, I don't know, whatever, horrible pain. I couldn't tolerate it. It was unbearable. And with the traditional Chinese medicine, within a week, I started having improvements in my digestion. And it's a battle, right? But I feel like I'm improving. I don't know, but I think so. And so I just think that's important. I hope I hope we're not just all going to be lined up for clinical trials like the microbiologist mentioned. you know, and that other alternatives, including a lot of, because, you know, how many societies have dealt with weird bacterial infections? Like, it exists in so many parts of the world, and I'm sure that there, you know, the truth is out there. Yeah. All right, thank you.
I am Heather Allen. I come from Winnipeg, Manitoba. I do not have Lyme. I'm not infected with Lyme, but I'm affected by Lyme. When Lyme enters your family in any sort of way, it is it's undescribable. The cost of Lyme to a family is just not the immediate family, it is the extended family. I am one of the extended family members. It extends to your social family, and there's such a cost to it economically that's not even just to the initial family. Lives change, dynamics change. The cost to losing your friends, the cost of trying to be somebody that you can't be anymore, and your family unit is never the same. And I have to tell you, I am heartbroken. We're new to Lyme. We've been in this only a year, but listening to some of your stories, it is just awful. And I am also one of the ones that doesn't have it, and I'm gonna fight for all of you. I'm smart, and I have a statistical background, and I know that numbers talk, and I guarantee you that is what's gonna make the change happen, and we'll make it happen. And that's our promise.
I have never seen a black-legged tick in the Bow Valley, only dog ticks, the dermacanters, yet many have been bitten and got the bullseye rash and have developed Lyme disease. There are many strains of Borrelia. New strains of the Borrelia bacteria are always being found, and testing will always be challenging due to its ability to change form. So all these tick tests that are going on, we just need to focus on treatment, because it is everywhere. It's all across Canada, and obviously it's not helping us in the Bow Valley. There are 1,600 people with Lyme in one Facebook group, yet most are not included in the national database. People are only included if they test positive with both tests, which are faulty, and this needs to change. There are at least 24 people with Lyme in the Bow Valley, so this is Banff, Canmore, and Lake Louise area. If I'm the only person in the Facebook group out of 24 people, and it's a similar scenario across Canada, there are thousands of people suffering across Canada. This does not include all the misdiagnosed that are suffering from chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, MS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, arthritis, and the list goes on. And one thing I didn't mention in my talk, and that I think is a really valid point, is that people can be bitten by a tick, affected, and it can go into your joints, and you don't really have a lot of symptoms. I had an MRI on my knee because my knee was bugging me. It took me 3 months to get in to see the MRI. When I got the MRI, before I got the results back, within that time I had the same pain in every single joint. I thought, okay, whatever's going on that knee is going on the rest of my body. What happened was there's not much left of my knee, and they told me never to run again. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't really like running anyways. And they were going to tell me about the skiing, and I'm like, I don't want to know. Just forget about it. The moral of the story is it affects you without you even knowing it until maybe it's too late. So we need diagnosis now.
The stories I've heard tonight, as a researcher who's traveled the world to study tick-borne disease, with a particular focus on prevention and risk management, your stories are the same as those people in Australia, France, in England, in Eastern Europe. Stories are similar in South America. You're not alone. And one of the things I'd like to point out, one of the themes that I heard tonight was that the United States is where it's at. And I'm here to tell you that IGeneX tests are not accepted by doctors in the United States. I pay out of pocket for all of my treatments because the insurance companies refuse to pay for Lyme treatment. It is not any different in the United States, and the battle with the CDC goes on. So what I encourage you to do is reach out to your MPs. They're your voice. You've elected them. As Canadians, you've had the privilege to elect, and these MPs are your voice in Parliament. And I really, really encourage you. There's one right here. She's here representing her area, her people, her citizens. There is a roundtable discussion. It's voluntary. All MPs from across Canada have been invited. It's on May the 30th. It's a critical discussion that needs to happen. Reach out. Make sure your MP gets there. And best of health to all of you.
There was a great suggestion that some of you need hugs. Please feel free to do so, but ask for permission first.